Good afternoon. Oh, thank you, Robot. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Simbrat. I work at Georgia Tech, and I am thrilled to be kickstarting the first of our EduDU scheduled Slack video presentations for folks in higher ed using Drupal to demo the awesome work that they're doing. And what better way to start it off than to have some folks from the University of Texas at Austin. So Paul Grotevant is going to give us a demonstration of, and as I quote, their university at the University of Texas at Austin is nearly ready to release a beta version of their next generation distribution. Built on Drupal 8, the UT Drupal Kit leverages the latest in Drupal core innovations, including Layout Builder and the growing ecosystem of Layout Builder contrib modules. In this presentation, you'll see a demo of what they've built, and they hope it'll improve things for their campus customers. So, Paul, I'm going to give you the reins and let you go forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. All right, so as Eric mentioned, this is me. I'm an IT manager at the University of Texas. My team builds website and website building tools. I'm Gravelpot on Drupal.org, and this is my email address. And I'll put these slides up on Slack when we're done here, in case anybody wants to look back. So, start with some background. We're talking about our campus Drupal distribution, which we call the UT Drupal Kit. As indicated from the UT Drupal Kit 3 on the title slide, this is really our third revision coming up. The first version of the Drupal Kit was released in January of 2015. It was really not that much to write home about from a functional perspective, but it was sort of to introduce the idea of a campus distribution. It was really the standard installation profile for Drupal 7 and packaged with a bunch of common contrib modules. We kind of did a survey of the most widely used distributions, both in higher ed and some of the more popular distros on Drupal.org, and just tried to include all the modules we thought anybody would ever need in a reasonable use case. That was kind of one of the first requests we had gotten from our campus community to have in a distribution. Was really a vetted list of modules. There was no custom theme, there were no custom content types. The only other piece that was made available at the same time was a custom module we wrote for integrating Drupal 7 with our campus authentication system, which the version of that authentication system we were integrating with was really a custom thing, not Shibboleth, not CAS, not anything you've ever heard of. So it was necessary for us to write a module for that. And as far as we know, this version of the Drupal Kit was only ever used by one site, which we later helped migrate to Drupal Kit 2. Drupal Kit 2 came in November of 2015, and was really the game-changing thing we had been planning on and working towards for a while. It was our first full custom distribution. It was heavily based on design and development work that had been done by an agency, which our university communications team had contracted with. For those of you who are in different types of organizations, I should specify that at UT, my team works out of the central IT group. There is a university communications group, which has some web developers now, but at the time in 2015 had no web development staff. So we were sort of working with them as their development proxies, but are not part of their organization. I did want to give a shout out to the EduDU community in general for being such a great place to get ideas and inspiration and advice about building a product like the Drupal Kit. I have talked to many people through the years that I met through this community, and as they say, good artists borrow, great artists steal, and I would like to say that we stole quite a bit from many of you. The features that we included in the Drupal Kit 2, probably the biggest one from a brand perspective was we had a custom theme. We call it 40 Acres because that's the nickname for our campus. and we included a starter kit sub-theme for people to use for starting their own sub-theme quickly. The kit distro shipped with 2 custom content types for what I call general purpose page building, sort of the equivalent of basic page from Drupal core, but with a lot more functionality. And we called those landing page and standard page. The landing page content type had 3 template choices associated with it, and the standard page content type had 8 template choices associated with it. There were a collection of custom content. We use the term widgets to describe them, and I'll show you examples of these as we get into this, but those were implemented as custom field types that we wrote for Drupal 7. Then we also had some add-on features that didn't ship with the distribution itself, but you could download separately and add to your site for events, news, and what we call team member, which is sort of like a people page. You could use it for faculty or staff in a department or whatever kind of use case for displaying a group of people that you have. We shipped some user roles. We made sure that the site shipped with Google Custom Search Engine integration, just ready to go, Google Tag Manager integration, ready to go, easy way to put Twitter feeds on your page. It's kind of a long list of basic needs that were fulfilled by the distro. We have made it available historically in 2 sort of distinct flavors. The one we call the UT Drupal Kit is really sort of the DIY version of our distro. You can download it as a zip or a tarball from our from an internal website. It is not available publicly. Or you can instantiate a new site on Pantheon using a custom upstream that we have. Then there's sort of a second flavor, which is really the same code base, but we run it differently, that we call UT Quick Sites. So if you compared a UT Drupal Kit and a UT Quick Sites site side by side, you would not be able to tell the difference between them. The difference is that our team manages those sites 100%. They're all hosted on Pantheon. They are tightly managed when it comes to configuration. We don't allow certain things to be modified or changed, and that helps us manage all the sites in the same way, sort of as a herd, so to speak. And you can see from our adoption numbers after 4 years, where we've ended up is that there are far more kits using the Drupal Kit flavor than there are using the Quick Sites flavor. I would attribute that basically to the fact that people like to preserve their option to customize more than necessarily that they actually want to customize much of anything. But we were pretty clear at the outset that Quick Sites sites really couldn't be customized much. So I think that drove a lot of people to choose the Drupal Kit. Just as a point of interest, the way I know these numbers on the Drupal Kit, the Quick Sites ones I know because we host all those sites and manage them. The Drupal Kit sites, we actually shipped a module with the Drupal Kit from the very beginning called the Beacon. And what that does is it's got a hook cron implementation that once a day reaches out over basically an HTTP endpoint and posts a JSON object with a bunch of data about the site. And we log that into our Splunk instance. And so we can actually go in and do some pretty cool reporting on what's going on with our distribution customers. Because otherwise, since it's sort of a grab and go type thing, we wouldn't really know who was running the UT Drupal Kit where. And we wanted some insights similar to like what Drupal.org gets, which with module usage statistics and that kind of thing. So I'd say what we've learned in terms of pain points about version 2 of the Drupal Kit had a lot to do with the way our custom fields and our content types were architected and packaged in terms of configuration. As I'll show you in a few minutes, there was a sort of a limited number of combinations of field types that could be applied on any given page, created using either the landing page or standard page content type. And while that was usually sufficient for new users or people just getting into the distribution, as people sort of became power users, you would often find that they wanted to try to do some more interesting combinations of fields in different ways that sort of broke out of the box that we had them in. And there wasn't really anything we could do to fix that. The second point was that our custom content types were all both shipped as features modules. And for anyone trying to maintain a distribution using features, you kind of run into this weird conundrum where it's the easiest and best way to ship a set of common configuration, but you're sort of locked into this thing where your customers can't really change what you're shipping, because if they do, they've overridden that feature. And if you want to update that feature in your distribution, they then end up with an override. And most of our customers, to be quite honest, are not familiar with features. They don't even really know that they're using features on their site. So talking to them about how to deal with reconciling differences between, their copy of the feature and our copy of the feature is just not really feasible. So that led us to point number 3, which we would recommend for people who kind of got to that point that they make their own content types and then add our custom field types to them. But the way our custom layout architecture was implemented made that harder than you would think it should be, just create a content type and add some fields to it. It was a sort of a complex multi-step process that at the end of the day, very few people outside of our team ended up going down that road. And then the final observation would be that we had a number of agency or contract vendors hired by departments to build websites for them. And for whatever reason, they specified using the Drupal kit as part of that site build. And what we found is that it was difficult for vendors, even if they were familiar with Drupal, to sort of quickly get in and understand how our distro worked and how to work with it as opposed to kind of working against it. So if an agency developer was really familiar with panels or display suite, the way our page building system worked was not going to feel familiar to them, really. So when it came to time to start thinking about a third version of our kit, the first big goal was we've got to get to Drupal 8. And when we thought about how to get to Drupal 8, we really thought this looked like a full rebuild of our distro from the ground up. But we wanted to continue to provide, a really nice custom theme that was customizable. And what people had really sort of gravitated to was the ease of use of this widget plus layout system. So we wanted to kind of double down on that if we could and make that even more flexible and easy to use. And then we also wanted to really maintain and refine our focus on our core use case, which is really public-facing websites that provide a high level of accessibility out of the box and a high degree of adherence to the university brand. We do not focus as much on use cases like intranets or hosting for restricted access resources or applications. So on our team, we like to occasionally, go through these sort of goofy exercises like, let's define our guiding principles. I say goofy because sometimes I'm the one instigating these things and I have to recognize that they're kind of goofy sometimes. So these were our guiding principles for this project, which we hope communicate to our customers the rationale and framework for some of our decisions. The first was the Drupal kit is for developers. We had some situations with Drupal kit 2, especially early on, where people would just go download the tarball of the Drupal kit and install it on our shared hosting platform here on campus. And they would just sort of assume that that's all they ever needed to do. They didn't know anything about doing updates. They didn't know anything about, building new functionality in Drupal. So we really want to reinforce that while the goal of the Drupal kit is to help facilitate content editors and content owners, the Drupal kit itself as a product is a tool for developers to use to build that experience for those content owners. First, do no harm is something we tried to do in Drupal 7 as well, but wanted to, again, reinforce that is we want everything we do to really work seamlessly with Drupal core. We don't want to be stepping on the toes of any Drupal APIs, so that if somebody wants to use something as a Drupal 7 references again, but like panels or display suite alongside our stuff, that'll work just fine. We don't want to have a long list of contrib projects that we say are incompatible with the Drupal kit. Third point was we really wanted to focus our efforts this time on only including contrib modules that are necessary for the functionality we ship. With Drupal 7 versions 1 and 2, we were actually shipping a lot of contrib modules that were not enabled by default. And just because they were commonly used and we wanted to sort of make people's lives easier by not having to download those modules. And what we realized over the long haul is what that does is put us in the position of having to be responsible for updating those modules even when we're not using them and not testing them. So therefore, there's a lot more maintenance backend associated with contrib that you don't think about necessarily up front. So nothing in the contrib folder that we don't decide needs to be there for a good reason. Reducing custom code. We had a lot of custom code in Drupal 7, and again, sort of in accordance with the previous two principles, we wanted to get rid of as much of that as we could, even if that meant that we would start maintaining or contributing to Drupal core and contrib modules instead of writing custom modules. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. We did recognize that we need to provide a migration path, at least from the base functionality of the Drupal 7 distro. Maintaining platform compatibility is basically about saying that our two target hosting platforms here at UT are Pantheon and our on-premise shared hosting. I haven't really revisited this one explicitly in quite a while, but this is turning out to be a little more difficult just because of the issues around Composer and our shared hosting platform, and as well as Pantheon. So this has kind of turned out to be one of the harder things, perhaps, but we haven't gotten to the point of saying no, it's not compatible with any one thing yet. And then one distribution, not two, is a reference to the difference between the Drupal kit and the quick sites. While those two services share 99% of the same code, they were actually two distinctly different upstream repos on Pantheon. And that made it difficult for us to do things like take in a new site as a quick sites customer, but then move it from the quick site service out to be a Drupal kit site if they decided that they wanted to start doing some customizations. So we wanted to avoid that this time and make it easier for us to just make code changes in one place, not have to do separate release cycles and that kind of thing. This is a list. I'm not going to read through this because I'm assuming everybody here is familiar enough with Drupal and Drupal 8 to know what the features and advantages of Drupal 8 are, but this was kind of my selling point slide to our stakeholders and customer steering committee about why moving to Drupal 8 was going to be a good thing. I'm going to pause for just a second to take a sip of water. So we've been working on this project for quite a while, and I thought for this group it might be most interesting to kind of break down this whole thing into three areas of concern that have absorbed a lot of our time. And those areas would be the theme, things having to do with our theme, which I'm going to say up front, I probably know the least about of any of this because I was never a front-end developer and Now I'm a manager, so I'm barely even any kind of back-end developer. Our content widgets, which we now call components, and our layout system. I am not going to get into discussing the features for the specific use cases like events and news. We haven't built those for Drupal 8 yet, so I don't have much to say on them yet. And they also, I don't think there's anything particularly special about the way we did that for Drupal 7. Probably, the most interesting thing there is talking about how you package them and do your configuration management, but we're not there yet. So talking about our theme, the points I would make about our Drupal 7 theme, it was based on our vendor decision. We didn't make this decision, the vendor did. The Drupal 7 theme was based on Foundation 5. I didn't note it in the slide here, but it did use Grunt and Bower for package management and task running. The most notable thing, the most notable difficulty about our Drupal 7 theme was that the theme and the custom content components were really very intertwined. The theme didn't really work well as a standalone theme without those components, and the components definitely didn't work well without the theme. So we wanted to change that for Drupal 8. So Drupal 8, we started out building based on Bootstrap 3, and we had made a choice to use just the Bootstrap library, not the Bootstrap base theme. We eventually, after working some with a really great front-end developer in University Communications, he recommended that we change to using the Bootstrap base theme, but then the campus design system, which is a whole different project, got kicked off. And the way it looked like that was going to turn out, what we ended up doing was removing our HTML and CSS framework dependency altogether, except for the Bootstrap grid. The design system does not have a Bootstrap dependency, so if we're going to use the design system, then we don't want to have that Bootstrap dependency either, at least for the look and feel. The grid, our design system is not going to dictate a grid, so you kind of bring your own grid to the game, depending what you're building. And then this time we have paid much more attention to keeping the components and the theme independent from each other. A lot of the components actually carry their own theming in each of their own custom modules, as opposed to in the distribution theme, 40 acres version 2. So there have been points where we had to really sit down and look at something and say, okay, does this particular piece of the theming for this thing belong with the module, or does it belong with the theme? So area of concern number 2 is our custom content components. In Drupal 7, these were architected, implemented as custom field types. And as I mentioned at the beginning, those field types were built onto 2 different content types, standard page and landing page. Basically, what this resulted in was a system that over time came to feel inflexible. It was hard to mix and match the field types into new content types. And within the existing content types, you were limited to just the field types that were shipped with it. For Drupal 8, we started with the idea of sort of implementing the same model of fields on a content type, but that instead of actually building custom field types, we would build paragraph types. And that then the paragraph types would be both on the content type, which we were going to combine the landing page and standard page into a single-use content type, but also that you could reuse those paragraph types more easily on other content types of your own. I forget how long it's been, maybe a year ago. One of the folks on our team ran across a presentation by Jacob Perry at GovCon, where he talked about the sort of ticking time bomb of entity reference revisions and paragraphs. I won't go into that, but if you just Google GovCon entity reference revisions, you'll probably find the video, and that sort of scared us away from the idea of relying on paragraphs as our content component architecture. So we actually, after having built all of them as paragraph types, we rebuilt all of them as custom fields, but we were still going to go with the custom fields tied to a single content type. And then finally, with the advent of Layout Builder and Drupal core 8.7, we took a third look at what we were doing and said, you know what? We don't even need to attach these custom field types to a content type anymore, because now there's this thing called inline blocks, and you can basically have blocks on every page that only belong to that page. And so why should we limit people to only like one instance of this field type on a page, when if they want to have 10 of them, they can just create 10 different inline blocks. So I'll talk more about that going forward, but that was a big shift for us, and is probably going to be the biggest overall change that will impact how content people engage with our page building system. And then finally, talking about layout, in Drupal 7, we had a system of layouts that were built as a custom entity type, and then those were tied to our custom content types. So you selected one of those layout entities as the first thing on editing a page. There was drag and drop capability that was mostly provided via the context module and context per node, excuse me. And as I mentioned at the outset, there were a finite number of pre-built layouts, and we even had some fields that were locked to specific regions in those layouts. So you couldn't necessarily use every field in any region on the page. For Drupal 8, almost 2 years ago, we kind of got started down the road of taking our own approach and building a new module that we actually did go ahead and release to the contrib space, called Layout per Node. And I want to say literally within a week of publishing Layout per Node as a contrib module, we started getting notes in the issue queue for that module where people were sort of indignantly asking why we had ignored everything going on with the layout initiative, and why we weren't contributing to that instead of building our own solution. Maybe this has happened to some of you with Drupal.org issue queues in the past. So it was genuinely just ignorance on our part. We didn't know about the Layout Builder initiative. We didn't know the things that were happening, but once we learned about it and looked at it and said, you know what, if this ends up doing everything that they say it's going to do, that's going to do what we need it to do. And you know, with all the support that comes from it being part of Drupal core, as opposed to our own contrib solution or somebody else's contrib solution. So at that point, we shifted gears and just basically started making all our plans on layouts around Layout Builder. We've become contributors in the Layout Builder space, both in core and contrib, and basically we think it's awesome. As a result, there will be no more constraints on layouts or fields tied to specific regions or anything like that in Drupal 8. And as a bonus for us, this will all be essentially core functionality, core or contrib. I think very little to none of our layout functionality will be custom code anymore. So at this point, I'm going to take another sip. And then we're going to do a quick run through of some slides that talk about fields. I am recycling these slides from a different presentation, so pardon the number of them. And again, this will be there for review if you want to take a deeper dive. But in case any of you are sort of saying, I don't get this difference between custom field types and paragraph types and field collections and all the other things I know about. So, you know, just quickly, to review, this is what Drupal calls the core field types, right? We have text field, text long, image, file, etc. Every field defines how it stores the data. It has a widget definition that is basically how does a user enter the data, and a formatter that says how do I display the data. When you're a site builder, you're basically taking those core field types and then also possibly additional contrib field types that you've added to your site to make new content types for different use cases. So Drupal core provides basic page that has a title field and a body field. If I was a site builder, I might make a news article content type that has title, body, image, tags, date, author, etc. So if we get into talking about how do I create something that sort of acts like a field but has fields of its own, traditionally we've done that using field collections or paragraphs primarily, because those are the two paradigms that allow us to kind of clicky click put that stuff together through the UI. So I might make a paragraph type called promo unit, which is one of the ones from our distro, and it's got an image field, a headline field, copy field, a link field, and a call to action. And the paragraph type sort of acts as a container to tie all those fields together. Custom field types do the same thing with more work, meaning you have to write some code, but they also do it way more efficiently, right? So every custom field type that we've written, and this is both in Drupal 7 and in Drupal 8, means you write some code and that field has its own field template and defines its own storage widget and formatters. So what you've got is something where instead of like headline being a text field, quick links is the field and headline is a field on that field, if you will. We refer to these usually as compound fields or custom compound fields, but really they're just custom field types in Drupal. It's just custom field types that have more than one field on them. So as I mentioned in Drupal 7, we had these standard page and landing page content types, and those really looked like what you would have put together if you were saying, I'm going to build a content type and I'm going to put some field types on it. They had all these different field types, but the ones in orange here were our custom field types, while the ones in blue were instances of the Drupal core text field type. But it's still, and you notice like, image link A and image link B, flex content area A and flex content area B, those were two different instances of the same field type, because somewhere along the line in the requirements gathering that we were never involved in, somebody said, oh, a person building a page might want to have two different flex content area sets. So let's put two of those on every page and let them use them both if they want. But if you wanted a flex content area C or a WYSIWYG C, you're out of luck. So with Layout Builder, what we've embraced is the ability to kind of unbundle the field types from the content type and just treat them as blocks. So every one of our custom field types, like hero or flex content area, is now tied to a custom block type. So we have the hero block, the flex content area block, the promo unit block. So you have one custom block type per field type. And with Layout Builder, you now have the ability to use these on a per node basis. That's what's called an inline block, or on a site-wide basis. And that was something that people also wanted in Drupal 7 that they could never do, which was, hey, I went to all this work of creating this beautiful flex content area on node 15, and I'd like to use that same flex content area on node 18. It felt like you should be able to do that, but you couldn't, because that was a field on node 15. You couldn't use it somewhere else. Now we can. So just kind of making the case for what we were calling for a while the blocks everywhere approach. Content types as a distro feature are inflexible and they're hard to maintain. And that applies both to our team as the distro maintainers and to site owners. Users eventually want more than a content type with a fixed number of fields can offer. And the rigidity of content types combined with the flexibility of blocks is kind of a bad user experience. So what we've chosen to do in the past 6 months is just move ahead with our core content type does not have any fields. And I'll show you in the demo, it's basically just a container into which you're going to start pouring blocks. So the road so far on this beast, we actually started working on this just over 2 years ago. Our first commit to a repo was in August of 2017. As I've sort of discussed, in many ways, we've built the whole thing twice over already. Built all our custom field types as paragraph types, and then we built them all again as custom fields. We built a contrib module for doing layouts, and then we totally backtracked and moved ahead with Layout Builder. I don't regret any of those decisions. I think we have a stronger product that is going to be better in line with what our customers need, and also better in line with Drupal core, the Drupal core roadmap. And we're going to be really well positioned, I think, for this to last a long time. And as Eric said in the intro, we're ready this month to release a beta to our customers for them to really start playing with and potentially even building sites. So we will see. I mentioned a while ago that we've gotten much more involved in the contrib space. So this is a list of all the modules that we currently have maintainers on as a team. I put asterisks next to the ones that are primarily maintained either by people from our team or other higher ed Drupal folks. Shout out to Brian Osborne from Princeton for the Layout Builder Styles module, which he graciously has let us help with that. Layout Builder Restrictions was one that somebody on our team, Mark Fulmer, got involved with pretty early on, and Chris Burge from University of Nebraska-Lincoln has also jumped on to help with that. Some of these are just kind of little utility modules that we needed for our own purposes, but we're putting them out in the contrib space now because we don't want all that code locked up in our own repos. And it's amazing how much more useful feedback we're already getting on those things that will help make them better. So just some other random technical tidbits. I won't dwell on any of these. We're using Doxel as our local development environment right now. We've just recently settled on using Artifactory, which is a commercial tool that we have available on campus for hosting our own composer packages. We're using Adminimal as our admin theme. We have not investigated Claro yet, so I hold our options open for that in the future. For Drupal 7 and where we started on Drupal 8 was having our documentation in a wiki. We have a campus-wide instance of Confluence, which is Atlassian's wiki product. And we are switching over to hosting our documentation ourselves in Sphinx. So it uses the res text format. And I'm really looking forward to being able to version our documentation in line with our distribution so that we can say, like, here is the version 2.1 set of documentation. And then that stays permanently like that. And then when the 2.2 release comes out, the 2.2 documentation is available, but you can refer back to the 2.1 documentation if you need to. We use PHP Unit for integration testing, and we have this probably should have gone with that. We use Jenkins instance to actually automate the execution of our tests on all of our PRs. We are a team of one manager, that's me, 5 to 6 developers, and 1 UX expert. But nobody is dedicated full time to this project, which is part of why it's gone on for quite so long. We have lots of other projects and responsibilities, so the amount of time we have available to dedicate to this project varies widely. We have a customer steering committee of 8 developers who are, most of them are current customers of the version 2 kit, some of whom aren't, so we're getting feedback from them on regular intervals. We work on this project in 2-week sprints, and we have a morning 15-minute scrum. We use Jira software, an on-campus hosted version of it for our backlog and sprint planning and issue tracking. And we use GitHub Enterprise for our source control and pull requests, which is how we do code review. What we did not even cover today, because obviously there's not enough time, is how we're structuring our composer packages, which is probably worthy of a whole other 1 hour discussion. We've just recently embarked on writing an installer script, a kind of a standalone deal, which has been fun and interesting, and didn't talk about our code review process. But those are things, and if anybody's interested in hearing more about them in the future, let me know. So what the road ahead looks like is, I think we have close to another year of development to fully finish everything, including those use case specific features, the team member news and events, and finish out a complete migration path. Second big issue is there are still many unanswered questions around composer support for custom distributions. Our concern is how we do that on Pantheon. If you're an Acquia customer, that's a different concern. If you're a self-hosted customer, that's a different concern. For us, we are really kind of pressuring and banking on Pantheon to help us solve some of those problems. And then I'd say the last interesting note is that what's going to make this potentially a fun ride going forward is a lot of this is going to be very new for our campus customers. Almost nobody on campus outside of our team has much of any experience with Drupal 8 or Composer. So we're going to have to bring a lot of people along on this journey with us. So with that, I am going to attempt to navigate my way out of the PowerPoint and into a web browser. So I'm going to hope that Eric will let me know if this cannot be seen, and I'll just proceed as though it can. So I wanted to start by showing some examples of sites that were built either using the UT Drupal Kit or UT QuickSites version 2. I'll just scroll through some of these pages. Call out quickly, like when I say flex content area, that's what this box here, these are 3 flex content areas in a row. That's one of our custom widgets. This is our hero widget. This is an example of the feed of upcoming events from our event feature. Let's take a look at another one. So this is another homepage with a pretty picture of the campus. This would just be a WYSIWYG widget where they've used, text formatting. This is a quick links widget. This is an image link widget. Here's another site using 3 flex content areas. 6 flex content areas in a row. This is says news. I believe this is actually a promo unit they're using there. This is an example of a site that's been heavily customized. So this is the Drupal kit, but it's a very, very deeply customized version of the Drupal kit. I can't even tell you what some of these, this is our featured highlight, but it's got some styling differences. This is our Twitter widget. Another heavily, heavily customized version with this one, a vendor designer came in and made some really, deep changes to some of the styling. Here's back to a less customized site. Here's our president's site. And finally, this is our community campus event day site. So I also wanted to just quickly show you guys what the edit interface looked like for the old version, because I think it's kind of instructive. So when you went to go create a standard page, here's your title field, but then the first thing you're presented with is choose which of these 8 layouts you want to use. Okay, so you pick a layout, and then you've got all your field types running down the side. And so these are all here for you to use, but you don't have to use all of them or any of them particularly. And then, so you start populating these fields with your content. And then if you go to, I'm going to just go to an existing page and show you that in the layout editor mode, you had these little boxes for your regions, and you could click to add a block in a region and then save the layout. One thing that was a little bit of a pain point with this is because it's all being done through context, the layout changes are actually not revisioned along with the content. So once you make a layout change, that layout change is live, and once you undo it, you can't see what it was like before. And that's another thing we're going to be able to do with Layout Builder, because the layout data is versioned with the content. So that's just a quick peek at what we had in Drupal 7. And so now, if everything works right, this is a quick peek at what we have in Drupal 8. This is the latest version of our code base that's been sort of shoehorned into a sandbox on Pantheon. I quickly created a new page and put a hero image on it just to be able to play around with that. Let me show you what the new page experience is going to be like now. So if I go add content, our new general purpose content type is called flex page. And a flex page has nothing but a title. As a title, and then what I would call the metadata for that page. All of the stuff like the URL, the meta tags, the menu, but no data. I'm going to save that. And now I'm on essentially a blank page. And now all the magic happens from this point forward in the layout tab. So for those of you who've seen Layout Builder demos before, this should look pretty familiar. You're on a layout, a form to edit your layout. You have one section by default that you can add a block into, and you can add new sections above and below that. So this is a single column section, and I'm just going to go ahead before I add any content and add a 2-column below that. We have given people the ability to select their column widths. So I'm going to call that a 6733. And then I'm going to add another section below that. That's a 1-column. And I'm going to say that's going to be a full width column. And we'll do one more section below that. That's maybe a 2-column 50/50. So right away, I have blown away the functionality of our Drupal 7 distro in terms of layout flexibility, because as you saw before, I was totally locked in to these 8 layout choices. And as you can see, it's not even really 8 layout choices. It's really like 3. You got 6733 in a couple different variations, and then you've got a couple different 100% variations. And now I can just keep adding sections to this all day long in whatever combinations that I want. So now I'm ready to start adding some content. So I'm going to go into that top 100% region, and you see that I have a list of things available to drop in there. But again, the magic is right here in this button that says Create Custom Block. And here are all of our custom block types that I mentioned, each of which has one attached instance of our custom fields. So probably most of the time, I'm going to want to start a page like this with a hero block. So I click on hero. Now, what we're seeing right here is the use of a contrib solution called Layout Builder Modal. Prior to us leveraging Layout Builder Modal, this whole edit form would have appeared over here in the settings tray on the right side of the page. And our UX expert in particular was not super happy about that experience because you get the whole edit form kind of crammed into this narrow space. Even if you start to make it wider, it really feels very cramped. And so Layout Builder Modal, which I think we saw demoed for the first time at DrupalCon Seattle by the Lullabot folks in their great Layout Builder presentation, kind of opens that up in a really nice way. So I'm going to call this hero image block. I'm not going to want to display that title. This is really just the administrative title. We're using media, so I'm going to go pick a media thing. This is a little bug right now where the media library doesn't drop in on top of the interface, so I just had to click on it. I've preloaded some media, so I'm going to select that image. And EduDU demo. So great to see you all. And then we'll put a CTA on it. And we have 5, well, really 6 defined styles for our hero image. And I'm going to pick just style 1. There's a whole thing I could go into about what this is actually doing here. It involves view modes and some custom JavaScript that's combining the selection of a couple different things into one menu. It's really so much that I'm not even going to try to explain it right now, but that is one of the places where we've invested some kind of UX polish, I think. And I'll just go ahead and save this so we can see it right out of the box. So there we go. There's my hero image. Now the customer has said, oh, well, we really want that to be a full width hero image. So now I'm going to go in and not configure that block, but configure that section and pick a layout builder style on that section and just say, I want that to be full width. Save that, and boom, now that's a full width container. So this is another like immediate huge win over our Drupal 7 distro, because in Drupal 7, things were either full width or they weren't. And you couldn't make something that wasn't full width be full width, and you couldn't make something that wasn't full width be full width. It was very rigid. So I'm going to go back to layout one more time, and I'm going to quickly add a block here and do another custom block. And, I think here I just want some text. So I'm going to add a basic block. And again, this is an administrative title. And I'm just going to drop some text in here. Come on. Oops. There we go. So now I've got some stuff there. I'll add another block over here. Do a quick flex content area. And for this one, this is a cool new feature we've got, is that we can use video media in the image of the flex content area. Zebra mussels are a huge threat to our freshwater lakes and rivers in Texas, as well as other places around the country. So the university is doing some research on that. Add that. That's a little buggy thing right there, so I'm going to remove that. Save the layout. So I'm going to stop there because at this point it's basically, lather, rinse, repeat. You just keep creating new blocks, dropping the blocks into the regions, adding new sections. I mentioned this before as a big deal. I didn't demo it, but you can go now to just quickly, instead of adding some content via a page, I could add some content via the custom block library. Add a custom block here. I have all my same block types. This was a very common thing people wanted to do, is create a quick links block and be able to use it on multiple pages. Clear text to that. And then just prove the point. Now I save that block. I'm going to come back to my page. I was instinctively going to go to the edit form. I don't even need to do that. I'm just going to go to layout, and I'll just put it over here in the right sidebar. Now, without going to create custom block, my quick links block that I just made is showing up in the right sidebar, because that is what we would call a site-wide block. So now, if I went back to the custom block library, I could put this block on as many pages as I want to, just like any normal block. And if I go edit it in the custom block library, that edit is going to propagate across all the pages where it's used. You're like, hey, how is that a big deal? That's how blocks work. Well, that is how blocks work, but it's not how our old custom fields worked. So that's why it's a big deal. So I think with that, I'm going to stop. We're right at 2 o'clock, and I apologize for going up to the hour. But if people have questions, I can hang around and try to answer them. I really appreciate everybody's time. Hope this was useful, and look forward to learning more from everybody else in this awesome community. But let's have at it with some questions if anybody's got them. Don't hear Eric, so I'm gonna look through the question list here and assume that people are still listening. So Brian asked, is our team responsible for applying upstream updates to all the sites that use this distro? The answer is yes for the ones that we manage in that SaaS pool. No for the ones that people start the site by downloading and building themselves. We are, because we're on Pantheon and we've built some automation around Pantheon, we are offering kind of an auto update service where people pay a certain amount of money, and our Jenkins server once a week checks sites for whether there are upstream updates available, and if there are, then it applies them, does some kind of smoke test checks to see if anything went wrong, and in most cases we just deploy those all the way to live with no issues. So that's been very successful. Talking about config management, yes, Drupal 8's config system was designed for a single site, not for distributions. We absolutely agree, and we are basically leaving configuration management as something for site owners to manage, not for us to manage. We are obviously, we have to figure out how to deploy some configuration with the distribution. Some of that is being done with features in Drupal 8. And some of that is being done via default config in the custom modules and the installation profile that we have. So basically the things that go as features, we are saying don't touch these things because we may have to update them in the future. But everything else should be fair game. Pleased with Pantheon and their custom upstream workflows? I would say yes. For Drupal 7, the Drupal 8 custom upstream workflow really has yet to be defined in a workable way from our perspective because none of it is composer based yet. So I am optimistic that they've heard our needs and that they're going to come up with a good solution, but I don't know what that's going to look like. What's user feedback been like for the layout builder approach versus the previous method? To be honest, we haven't gotten a ton of user feedback yet. We do have the UX person on our team who's kind of our most experienced site builder as well as our UX expert, and she's really happy with it so far. She's given us some really valuable feedback about what it feels like. She did say several times that it's going to take people a while to get used to not editing pages from the edit form. But that once you make that mistake a few times of hitting edit and then all of a sudden there's no fields there, that you get used to it pretty quickly. What do the node revisions look like? Are there revisions of each custom block? I cannot answer that question super well, so I'm going to defer on that one, and somebody else from my team might be able to answer it in Slack. Have you used Entity Browser to have users create custom pieces of reusable content versus custom blocks? I think the answer to that is no. But again, that may be one better suited for one of the other developers on my team. See, somebody answered. Yes, okay, keep a watch on schedule Slacks. Looking at the chat. Has moderation been any more difficult since less is strictly part of the node, i.e. not entity reference revisions? I think the answer to that is it's actually going to be easier. At least that is what that is what it looks like to us. Part of that is the fact that the layout data will actually be revisionable now. We have not done extensive testing using the workflow module. I think that's the right name for it. The replacement, the in-core replacement for workbench moderation yet, but we are sort of banking on the idea that because this is all built in core, that it should just work. And if it doesn't work, then we can go to the layout builder team and say, hey, why doesn't this work? And I know there have been discussions about that. I just don't know the details of them. All right, I think that was everything. Oh, all right, Mark's answered us about the node revisions question. Revisions for inline blocks happen with each node save together. So yes, they have individual revisions, but a revision represents any changes to any inline blocks. Site-wide blocks are not revisioned. Thank you, Mark. All right, last call. Again, thank you everybody for your time. Really appreciate it. And I guess we'll wait to see if Eric's able to distribute the recording link for this, and I will coordinate with him to get the slides out. So I will say goodbye from there. Everybody have a great weekend.